Ahoy and welcome. I am Lee, the Pirate Tester. Today is part 2 of my talks on community to practice. If you haven't seen part 1, I'm going to put a link back to it in the description. I haven't figured out how to mess around with putting stuff on here otherwise. So, previously we talked about creating our vision for the community to practice. Now we are going to look at our principles and our values. So our principles determine how we're going to work together, and our values are why we do what we do. Because if you go, this is the vision for our community practice, but we don't know how we will work, why we'll do all these things, then it's quite a shaky ground. It can feel like it's unfinished, as it were. So I'm going to start with principles. So with your principles, a good way to think of it is it's about what are the behaviors that the community practice will follow. And it can be very difficult to think it through initially, because you can be like, well, we want to be polite and we want to give everyone time and so forth. And there's a technique that Emily Webber mentions in her book that is really good, which is talking about anti-patterns. So the way to do it is, what are the worst behaviors that people could have within the community and the community itself have? So I've given some examples in my quite poor handwriting. So you could have it where people are constantly interrupting. So it could be interrupting a presenter or the facilitator. So if someone's giving a demonstration of a new tool, a technology, a conference they went to, something like that, if someone's constantly interrupting them to ask questions, to criticize them, so forth, it can ruin their flow. It can be off-putting to the other attendees. It's not nice. No one wants to be constantly interrupted. If they say, if you have a question, ask, that's fine. But unless they do it, assume they don't want you to. Another could be rigid with the dates or times that your sessions happen. So you could say they happen every other Monday at 11 o'clock. And in theory, that could sound fantastic. You'd be like, right, this is always going to happen. But in the UK, we have bank holidays, and in America they have like federal holidays and public holidays elsewhere and so forth. And often ours are on a Monday. So if they would fall when you would have your COP session, do you just miss out that fortnight until you have to wait a month to your session? Or do you say, actually, no, we should change the dates? If you're not willing to move the dates at all, what happens if other things come up? Similar with times, if you might go, well, there's a mandatory all hands meeting, or there's a severe defect that we've had to drag loads of people onto this thing. Can we push it back even an hour or a couple of hours or the next day so we're still roughly in time? If you just go, no, it happens at 11 o'clock every other Monday, whether people are here or not, it might just be like me sat there on my own in the room going, I wonder where everyone is. Oh yeah, there's that big meeting I should be in, but I said this is going to happen at this time, and it's not my fault if other people got to move around it. It's not very good. Similar to interrupting, you've got talking over each other. So someone could be asking a question or have ideas or an answer, so forth. And similar to the interrupting is, you could talk over someone, especially if someone's not a strong speaker. They don't have a loud voice. They might be naturally quite timid or reserved because they could be new to the group, or that could just be their personality type. Talking over them, whether it's in support or not, you might find that person just doesn't want to talk anymore. And they could be filled with ideas, questions, answers, all sorts. But if you're always talking over someone, they're going to stop talking. And the whole point is to encourage people to do these things. And finally, this is really weird because I don't have it mirrored, is distractions. So It could be in physical community practice sessions, so not common right now, but that's how they used to be for us, is people doing other work during the session or playing on their phones, things like that, just not paying attention to what's going on in the room. Now, these are just a handful. The way I would do it is I would break people up into groups of, say, maybe 4 to 5. So depending on how many people you have in the session, you might want to do groups, particularly if you've got a large community, or you might want to just have it individually and just get people to write things on sticky notes, put them up. So I would, if I was doing this for real, I would have a massive sheet of paper, just put like, and pretty much just put worst behaviours, just this in the middle of it, and get everyone to start writing them out, putting them on. So if you do it with groups, you can bounce ideas off each other. If you do it individually, you are at the risk of people duplicating, but then it reinforces lots of people think that's a bad thing. So if lots of people go, we shouldn't be talking over each other, you go, right, a lot of people are going to be bothered or annoyed by this. They think this is a bad thing. Let's not have this happen. So don't be afraid of that duplication depending on how you do it. Because even if you end up with groups, group 1 and group 2 could still both say, we think a terrible idea with people being distracted with other things going on. By having those worst behaviors, you can then flip them. In case you don't know what flipping is. So from there, think of it as what we can do to prevent these worst things happening. Because if you can prevent them, then rather than going, what are our best or better behaviors, you can go is, well, if we don't allow all these really bad things to happen, then we're going to leave lots of wonderful, lovely things to happen. So going round, you could say, right, we're going to make sure there's a facilitator, ideally someone who is confident enough to prevent people from talking over each other or from interrupting, so they can help maintain the flow. They're not there to present the topic, but they might be ones just keeping it moving, keeping everyone focused. So if you're doing group discussions, you might be like, okay, you've had plenty of time to speak, please give everyone else the time to speak, or can you wait? Or even if it's also just be like helping people get the room set up and so forth. So with that, you can make sure, right, we start on time. Why? Because the facilitator's got the room ready. We plugged in the laptop, the projector. We brought in pads of paper, sticky notes, all this kind of stuff. So you can make the most of the time you've got. You could say in physical sections, there are no laptops and no phones allowed. If you want to take notes, be old-fashioned, pen and paper. At my workplace, we have these massive printers that also have built-in scanners. So if you go, but I want to keep my notes digital, scan them. Nothing stops you. You can still take notes. If someone is obviously not paying attention, say doodling, then you could just politely ask them to leave or pay attention. But if someone's doing some stuff on a laptop, like, oh, I've got something I really need to do. Okay, but please leave and then come back when you can pay attention, because it's disrespectful to the presenter and to the entire community. Because it is optional. If people do have work they need to do, focus on the work. Don't split your attention, because you're just going to do neither very well. You've got raising your hand to talk. It might sound childish, but the reason we do it with children is because often they can talk over one another without realizing it. So if, say, for example, I was presenting something and I saw someone raise their hand, I could acknowledge and say, please ask your questions at the end, but I remember you want to ask one, or let me finish this part and I'll come over to you. Or I might go, yes, what is it? Depending on how I feel. If it's a group discussion, you could use your facilitator to say, right, thank you very much, you have a question, or you raise your hand, that kind of thing. So you can, a lot of it can all work together, but it also reinforces that people do have something they want to say, want to ask, so forth. Because if you suddenly have the entire room put their hands up, then it shows that they are respecting one another, but at the same time they have something they want to input in some way. And then finally you might say, right, well, let's vote for dates or times, because if you go, right, it's going to be at 11 o'clock on a Monday because I decided that I set up the COP, people might go, well, a lot of us, we do our sprint planning on a Monday, and so we just can't do Mondays at all. Or actually we find that we've got a lot of things in the morning. Could we look at them, say, post lunch, or could we do them alternating dates? So previously we had it where certain days, like, the entire team would work from home, or certain days the entire team would be in the office. So by saying, well, we're going to run twice every fortnight, so twice a month. The first one is going to be on a Wednesday. The second one is going to be on a Friday. So that way, if people always work from home on one of those days, unless they work from home both of them, they can be involved. But with technology and stuff now, if people are working from home, try and still have it where you can include them outside the scope of that. But it could be worse behaviour, excluding people not physically present. Because if someone goes, can I dial in? Well, it's a presentation. Can they share their screen? Can someone video it? That kind of thing. So again, it's thinking about what all your terrible, terrible things are, what you don't want to happen. By going, how can we stop that? You can also reinforce to go, right, Lee, you're talking over people. We agreed we won't do that. And it can be a nice reminder, because effectively it's like creating a social contract. I know that gets used in agile things and so forth. And the term can seem quite strong, but ultimately it's, we agreed not to do this as a community, and we're going to do this instead. And it's what we agreed, because again, it's the community determining these things. It's not me, it's not the facilitator, it's not whoever wants to start it off, it's not a handful of people and it's set for time. And again, these can change over time. You might say no laptops, but if you wanted to do an interactive workshop, people might need to bring their laptops, and it can be really difficult to go, no laptops. Oh, we all need our laptops. Like the Pirates Code from Pirates of the Caribbean, these are more guidelines than hard, fast rules. So be open to changing them, but evolving them over time. So we know how we work together. Next, we're going to look at our values. So why we should do what we do. So to me, this is a 3-stage process. I say to me, again, this is me following Emily's book. So the first is, what is a value? So it can be very difficult to define a value, because even if you try and Google it, it can be a bit woolly, a bit hard to say. So some examples I found and I've used before is a value is helpful. It applies reliability, equity towards people. They're traits you aspire to. So not necessarily what the value is, but what the value is about. So then you go, what are your personal values? And again, this is where you can have a big sheet of paper and just put on it, like, what are your values, and get people to fill them out on sticky notes, put them up. And if you get duplication, that's not a bad thing, because these are your personal values. So what values matter to you? So I had examples of people who had values of being loyal, being respectful, being honest, being charitable. That is what they were about. Some people, personal values could be about always wanting to learn, about supporting people, about, it could be anything. Once you know what people's values are, that's when you can then build on them. So you could use those values like individually, or you combine them as a basis to create some values. And I would recommend using 5 values, because it's not so few that can be easy to focus on, but not so many that they either gets distracting or gets hard to build them. If you try to do it and you go, we couldn't settle on 5, we really wanted these 6. Again, think of everything as this is a template. None of this is etched in stone. It is literally on bits of paper. Or you might go, we got to 4, we struggled to 5. Well, stick with 4. You can always add more over time if you want, or go, are we happy with them? So Examples that we made for a club I've been involved with is every voice matters. And that relates back to what I said in my part 1 video, where you could say everyone is equal regardless of role. So you can go, if someone is a brand new employee, they could be an apprentice or a junior or a trainee, depending on how your organisation is built. Their voice is just as equal as someone who has been here for 20, 30 years, is a senior manager and all sorts of stuff. You can go, our voice is all the same. They might have different levels of experience, but that doesn't mean that their voice is more or less important. If people like, we want to know about SQL, I could tell them about it, but that doesn't mean if someone asks a question, I go, that's a silly question, shut up. That's not fair. That's not a good value to have, is being disrespectful to people. Another is providing relevant and reliable information. So that's where you could go, right, we'll try and make sure that when we discuss things, we aren't going off topic. So if we were going to have a test community of practice, well, we need to make sure we don't necessarily go off too far about things that don't apply to testing. So you might go, well, we're going to talk about code and coding standards. Well, you could say, is that relevant for testers? Yes, because if we know what the coding standards from the developers are coming in, we could think about how we might test them. But if something is changing every day, week, month, etc., if that information isn't reliable, then is it worth sharing? Could go, this is what's happening at the moment, but it's subject to change. And it's where you can go, right, it's relevant right now, but it might change, keep in mind, but I'll inform you and so forth. So with this, you get to go back and so with those two things, you know how we are going to work together and why we do what we do. So I was debating if I was going to have the next part as a separate video or continue. And I think I'm going to do it. I'm going to continue on just so I can have it as a 2-part video. So we've got our vision from part 1. And now we've just done our principles and our values. So the next thing I would do is an interactive workshop. And what I would encourage you to do is start looking at some goals for your community practice. Because if you go, we exist, but we don't know what we're trying to work towards, it could be hard to get people involved. It can be hard to make sure you're doing what you should be doing. So, like so many things, this is a 3-stage process. So the first are to create SMART goals, and I'm going to go into detail what they are. I've seen it as very much like a corporate thing. So depending on where you've been or how you worked previously, you might not know the term SMART as a goal. And it is an acronym. It's not saying like a not dumb or not intelligent goal. It's a particular thing. It's not being derogatory. But it's about making sure that your goal works towards your vision. Because if you go, our vision is X, if your goal isn't to accomplish X, then why does that goal exist? Where did that goal come from? The second part is dot voting on the goals to create priority. So if you've never done dot voting before, the idea is you give each person a number of dots. So it could be with little stickers, or it could just be with a pen and you just put a dot on something. And with that, you go, everyone has an arbitrary amount of dots. Most commonly, it's 3. And you can go, right, you've got 3 dots to place. You choose where to place them. So you go, right, I really want this one thing to happen. This is the most important thing in my opinion. And you put 3 dots on it. Or you might go, right, this one's quite important, but I also want to make this one happen. So you go, I'll put 2 dots on this one and 1 dot on this one. Or you go, there's the 3 things I want. To me, they're all equally important, but they're not like majorly important. I'd like them all, but none more than the others. You can put 1 dot on each. And if you're using 5 or whatever, you can. The principle applies of the dots can be divided how you want. The risk with dot voting is if you have it where you get people to do it in order, is you can risk a snowballing effect. So if something starts to get several dots early, people might go, well, I'll vote for it because everyone else says there must be something to it. Or you can get the flip side. You go, well, no one's voted for this thing. I don't want to put like a dot on it and have people go, well, what made you vote for that when none of us did? So that there is a risk with that, and I have seen it happen. I've seen some people put a dot on something and it had no votes on it just because they wanted to give it a pity dot, which isn't the right reason. But you might end up with so many things that they can't all be voted for. But conversely, you don't want to have so many goals that you won't actually achieve them. So that's where your priority can help. It's not saying, right, we want these 4 things and nothing else matters. You can go, we want these 4 things to work on now. We can deal with these later on. And then it might be in a year's time, you go, right, let's look at some goals again. Did the goals that we didn't accomplish, we want to put back on? Because the goals you wanted at the time can also change. So again, you can put a goal in, doesn't stop you adding more in the future or taking them away. You might go, actually, the direction for the community, the company, the team, whatever, doesn't fit. Let's get rid of this goal. And then finally, you want to break your goals into manageable actions. So if your goal is quite a big piece, so this is where people who've worked out or can think of, you go, right, this story is too big. We need to break it down into manageable chunks. So I've got an example of something we can do later on with that as well. So I'm going to go into more detail on creating SMART goals. So for a goal to be SMART, I love writing things on paper. So it needs to be specific. So what do we want to accomplish? Why is the goal important? And who is involved? So you could go, right, we want everyone in the test team, within the digital team, the BAs, the .NET developers, whatever, to do this. So you can go, well, that's who's involved. So if you said, right, we want everyone in the test team to be able to write and run automation scripts. So we're going to use that. So it's specific. We want them to be able to write specifically automation scripts. So if they can or can't do manual scripts, that doesn't matter. We know what we're looking for. So once you know the specific thing you're after, is it measurable? So how much or how many things times items are you looking for? So if you go, we want every member of the team to be able to write an automation script. Well, if your team has 30 people in it, can you go, right, well, these 10 people, they can write an automation script, these 20 can't. Well, we can see how we're doing. So if you go, how will we know it's accomplished? Well, if all 30 people in the team can write a script, yes, we can know it's done. If it's 20 out of 30 can, then we can go, right, we've not finished this goal or it's ongoing, so forth. But you can measure. If you go, the risk is if it's not measurable, then in particular, you can go, how do we know it's finished? So it can, depending on your goal, if you have something that can be quite woolly or soft, if you can't measure it, you can go, have we finished this goal? We don't know. That's not a good goal. By the way, all this can apply to doing your personal objectives. This isn't just a group thing. Is your goal achievable? So how can we accomplish the goal? How realistic is the goal? So if you wanted something very extreme, so we want everyone in the test team to be able to do security and penetration tests, you can go, that's fantastic. We can measure it specific. But if only, say, 2 out of 30 people are involved with any form of security. So for example, I work in our database team. Whereas so it's unlikely I'll do some security stuff compared to, say, people on our web front end team where there are logins and so forth. So you could go, well, it's not achievable for everyone to do that thing. Or you go, we want everyone to learn how to do stuff with AI. Well, if the company isn't going to be going near AI anytime soon, is it a realistic target? Because you can go, can we accomplish this? Not really. We haven't got anyone who knows this, and we're not going to use it for 10 years. Well, why have it as a goal then? Then next up we have, is it relevant? So is this the right time? And does this match your other goals or efforts? So again, if you said, we want everyone to learn about AI, well, if the company's not going to be doing much with it for several years, the idea behind the goal could be great, but if it's not relevant to what you're doing now, go away. Whereas if you go, we want everyone to be able to do automation testing. Okay, is it relevant? Well, we've got 20% of our stuff done with automation. The company wants to try and improve that. Yep, this aligns with other goals or efforts, because it can be goals within the community, but also efforts of your wider organization. And then finally, time bound. When will it finish? So if you said, we want everyone in the test community to learn automation within the next 12 months, so you're keeping it specific, you measure at one point you've got that time, because if it never ends, if you can just keep going and going and going, it can drag it out, you can lose focus. So by making your goals smart, your goals will be much, much stronger. So once you've made your smart goals, that's when you get your people to vote on them. When you're making your goals, what I would encourage you to do is, so again, good old big pieces of paper. If you're doing it physically, you can do Kanban boards, so forth. I would split your goals into two groups. So have one group where you can go, these are short-term goals. These are goals that we want to accomplish within the next 6 to 12 months, no more than 12 months. And then conversely, have the goals that you can go, we know these are going to take well over a year. They might take up to 2+ years. The reason being, it allows you to focus your efforts in different ways. So you can still say something that's 5 years down the line, it's still time bound, because you can say within the next 5 years, we want to do this. But you could say each year, we want to be able to go, right, we've got first year, we want 10% of the people to be able to do this thing, then up to 30, 50, 75, 100 or whatever. So you can still measure it as you're going. You don't want to be like, no one, no one, no one, no one, everyone. Because what happened in that final year for it to suddenly click with people? So once you've got your goals split up into your short and your long-term goals, do your dot voting. You might say you've got 3 dots for short-term goals and 3 dots for long-term goals, because they aren't necessarily at odds. But you can think, well, why is this a long-term goal and not a short-term goal, or vice versa? So if you go, we want everyone to learn automation within the next 12 months. Well, was that 12 months just set in there to be a particular deadline? But if you've got a very large team, is 12 months realistic? Or would you say we want at least half of the team? So you can adjust your things. You might go, right, the idea is great, but we've got too many people who we need to teach and not enough people who can share that knowledge. So it might not be achievable. Because again, think about how you can make it smart. Is it achievable to get 100 testers to learn automation in 12 months? You might go, no, that's not doable. But you might say we want one person within each sub-team to be able to know it. Okay, if you get more than that, fantastic. You've exceeded your goals, but it gives you something to work towards. So then finally, once you've got your goals and you can go, right, these are our top, say, 3 goals. These are the most important ones. You can just go, we're going to list all the goals somewhere afterwards, but we're going to focus on the priority. So we are going to go, this one at the highest, we want to achieve it first and work down. But you still might have to go, it didn't get many votes, but it's a quick win or so forth. So finally, how to break down a goal. And this is one that we had when we built one. And a common one we had was giving an overview of X tool. So it could be an overview of Selenium. For me, it was things like InfoSphere, it's a database tool. It could be It doesn't have to be a tool. It could be an overview of exploratory testing, for example. The problem is overview is very vague, and that's where you can break it down. So we created a discussion and we came up with these 4 things. So the first was, we want to be able to do a show and tell on X. So we want to be able to do a show and tell on Selenium, on SQL Developer. We want to be able to go, this is what it is, this is what the tool does, let me tell you about it. Okay, we can go, that goal has happened, because that action for that goal can happen, because the goal could still be ongoing, but different parts can be broken up. So you could go, we're going to do a show and tell before we do anything else. Now that I've shown you about it, we can go, does this fit what we want to do? If we go, oh, actually, that doesn't do what we thought it did, nah, none of us want to know about it, or go, actually, yeah, that's really intriguing. So we can go, okay, let's now actually have a detailed walkthrough. So I've had my show and tell. Play camera. But now we're going to have a walkthrough and go into more detail. So you might go, what's you shown? You can go, you can demonstrate how to use it. So it might be part of the walkthrough, or it could be as more an interactive thing. And then finally, you could say, as part of the overview, people need to be able to demonstrate an understanding. So it could be people using it within the following month. It could be giving people a quiz at the end of a session. That was an idea we had. Different people can demonstrate an understanding in different ways, because it depends if it's something you can actually apply, or is it more conceptual, is it an idea, so forth. So it can be quite open. But once you know, we could say our goal is an overview of this. These are the actions within the goal. And it makes it, again, it helps it make it more manageable, more achievable. Because you could say, right, within 12 months, we wouldn't want to give an overview of this tool. But within the first 2 months, we want to be able to do a show and tell. Because if we don't do that, the rest of this can't happen. We can't demonstrate an understanding if we've never seen the tool before. It's kind of a sequential thing. So that's how you could break your goals down. You could, if you said, right, we want to be able to have everyone able to perform automation and write an automation script. Well, again, you could do similar things. You could say, well, how can we prove that everyone can do this? Depending on the work they're doing, they might not have capacity or the amount of work necessary to write all this automation scripts. You might not be on a project that's viable. You might not have the time, depending on what you're working on. But you could show it to someone, but not write it them every day, week, month, whatever. So that is the conclusion of how I would set up a COP. So I did do the goal setting physically as part 3. But I figured I'd keep it together. I've gone well over 30 minutes, but you're worth it. So I hope that you have found this useful. I hope you, again, for those of you who've watched several of my videos, you like the style and the format I go for, because I like to think about, this is what I would do in real life if I was talking to you. Don't think of this as, this is Lee on a screen on YouTube. This is if Lee was talking to you on Zoom, we were having a one-to-one conversation. If we were at a table and I was here with all of my Sharpies and pad of paper. This is how I would do the same. I actually went back to my blog posts to review what I did and pretty much recreate these. So I kind of drew much of this stuff before, but on a massive sheet of paper, which I don't own, sadly. So between those 2 videos, I hope it allows you to start your own community practice if you haven't got one. If you have got one, to look back and go, well, have we got our goals? Have we got our vision? Have we got values? Because you might not have all of these things, but you could go, maybe we should. So thank you very much for watching. I have been Lee the Pirate Tester, and I look forward to hearing about how your communities go. Goodbye.